Hey everyone, if you own a Toyota MR2 Mark III, which is made before January of 2002, you're probably aware that the two pre-catalytic converters disintegrate and eventually get sucked into the engine, destroying it. So the exhaust manifold needs to get replaced. As a result, today I'm replacing my factory exhaust manifold on the left with this aftermarket stainless steel one on the right. If you need to get one of your own, I recommend Roadster Sport. I'm going to put a link in the comments to their eBay hub. Also, they have a website, roadstersport.uk, and you can use code AS1 for a discount. So those two were already gone when I bought the car. The problem is, I believe these two bolts, here and here, they're 12 millimeter, I think. They're both rounded off. I'm not sure if I can get focus on that. Let's give it a try. Yeah, there we go. That's those are rounded off. So I can't get them off with the torque wrench. There's the other one. Whoa, can I get focus on that? Not too bad. Yeah, that's rounded off. What I'm going to have to do is remove the muffler. And then I've got completely open access to that heat shield, and then I'm gonna cut those two bolts off with the grinding disc on a cutting disc, sorry, on an angle grinder. Okay, so I have pulled off the rear muffler, and that has given me full access to the heat shield. So those are the two rusty rounded bolts that I need to cut off with the cutting disc on an angle grinder. So I'm going to do that now. Okay, so now it's time to remove the oxygen sensors. So we've got one of them here, and the other one is still installed. I'm removing it now. Just use a 22 millimeter oxygen sensor socket to crack that. That was relatively easy. There we go. So we can see if this box will pop off now. On the left hand side, I just chopped the bolt off. It was a little bit tricky, so I decided it might be easier, instead of cutting through a hardened bolt, to cut through the tin instead. So I attempted to cut a square around the bolt with the cutting disc on my Dremel. However, that actually turned out to be really time consuming and not very efficient. So I wound up just cutting the other bolt off as well. So hopefully now, first attempt. Ooh. That's it. Man, I should drop kick that thing. Okay, what do we got? Oh man, jeez. These are not gonna come off easy. Look at that. Once again, probably said this 20 times on these videos now, this is what you get when you buy a car that's been parked outside too long. This thing is rotten. Okay, so there's no need to take the bottom heat shield out. The entire cat converter setup will come out without it. However, mine's completely rotten. There's a couple of bolts, I think 12 millimeter bolt there and one on the other side. It's completely rotted out on that side and 90% rotted out on that side, and it's just snapped. So actually the whole thing just lifts out. So that is what you're looking at. And these are your three amigos. There's another one there, and one dead center down the back there. Drop kick that shit. Right. Managed to get the bottom left stud nut off. I've managed to get the bottom center off, and this is them here, nice and rusty, pretty rounded. I'm going to be drop kicking them into the scrap metal bin later today. Unfortunately, the bottom right hand side stud nut, I'll try and film that, snapped clean off. It's stuck inside the head. So we'll do something about that later when I get the headers off and get more access. I'll probably buy a kit allowing me to drill it out and rethread it. So as for these bottom two that did come off, I have bought these copper nuts off eBay to handle the high heat. I'll get those on. And as for the top two, they're both rounded. So the torque wrench just slipped around on them. Which is not good, but could be worse. Alright, so the next step is going to be even harder, which is kind of terrifying. The three Amigos, infamous for their notoriety for being hard to get off. I'm going to film one of them. They're at the bottom of the exhaust manifold, and in the dead center there, that is one of the three. 17mm socket required for that. Again, I've not even tried with a regular 17mm socket. I've gone straight for one of these Goodyear ones, never used before, designed for handling tough to remove nuts. So we're going to give it a shot and see if it works. All three have cracked off absolutely fine. So I've got, let me see here. I've got that one off, just put it back on with some copper grease. Broke off straight away. I've got that one off straight away, put that back on with copper grease, and now that is the final one, and it just cracked again. No trouble with this Goodyear socket, and taking that off now, gonna put it back on. While I'm down here, there are, if I can film them, there's a couple of support brackets that hold the exhaust manifold to the bottom of the engine block by the looks. They look like different sizes. This one looks like a 12mm, and this one looks a bit bigger at 14mm. So while I'm down here, I'm gonna bust them off too. Okay, so back on the exhaust manifold, I'm still struggling with the top two studs, that one there and this one here. As you can see, again, really severely rusted. I did try a 6-pointed deep 3/8 socket. It just goes around and around on these. It's really struggling. So I moved on to a Goodyear one I bought, and it might have worked if I tried it first. It's got the round edges, so it only grabs on the flat sides of the stud. It might have worked if I tried it first, but it's too far gone, and although I still like these, it didn't work. It just went round and round. So what I've started to do is use the cutting disc on my Dremel, this guy here, and very gently file down the stud until such a point as the threads start to expose themselves, and then I'm going to pour some penetrating lubricant in there, let it sit for a couple of days. And I've got a cold chisel on order on eBay, and then I'm going to try and rip the stud off with a cold chisel. Okay, so using the cutting disc on my Dremel, I have first of all cut a couple of slots into the top of the exhaust manifold and peeled it up to get access to the bolt. And then I bought this off eBay, a 6mm wide cold chisel, and I'm just basically smacking away at the nut to try and break it off. Okay, we're finally starting to get some results. After hitting it with a cold chisel enough times, it finally moved, and we're getting to a point now where we can move it around with pliers. So I'm going to try and spin it off now. Alright, so I've got a new nut on with lots of copper grease, and I'm going to give it another try on this side. Now, one piece of advice I'd give to anyone who finds themselves in the same situation is that cutting into the top of the exhaust manifold and peeling it up for more access is pretty much mandatory, because although these nuts are quite small, they have a really big, wide seat. And it's that which I believe fuses to the exhaust manifold and is what really seizes. So with the cold chisel, I was sort of punching around at the front of the nut, and it wasn't really doing anything. It was only when I got the access to get to the back of the nut that I really started to get some movement. I have used this cutting disc to grind the stud nut flat all the way back to the rear seating of the nut, which is seized against the exhaust manifold. And if I use the cold chisel, you can see, there we go. So I've got a nice big flat surface to apply the cold chisel to. And a couple of really good hits counterclockwise with the cold chisel, and it started to come loose, and with some vice grips you can see that you can just wind it off now. That's it. So pretty much intact in terms of the threads. So that's everything. All the studs are off now. The 3 amigos have been loosened. The oxygen sensors have been loosened. So it's time to swap over the factory exhaust manifold for the aftermarket one. All right, here we go. Right, now that's it there. Now let's inspect the cat converter. No damage in that one. Okay, let's have a look in here. Oh, maybe a little bit of pitting, but not any really obvious damage. And then from underneath, so this car's done 103,000 miles, and that's not too bad considering. Oh, there's a little bit of pitting. What's that? Hang on. Check that out. So it was starting to disintegrate and possibly getting sucked into the engine. So yeah, definitely time to be removed. So by the looks of these soot marks on the inside of the flange here, it looks like the gaskets were breaching and this manifold was actually leaking. And this is what you get to work with. That's all the space. So it looks like my my timing chain tensioner gasket is leaking, and that's motor oil coming out. As I mentioned earlier, I snapped off one of the studs, so that's going to be a different battle for another day, drilling that out and perhaps rethreading it. And I'm going to try and video up these ports. I'm not sure how good the focus is going to be. Okay, time to put on the aftermarket exhaust manifold. Okay, and now we have the finished result. Tighten the nuts to 37 Newton meters and be sure to clean the manifold thoroughly with a cloth, because fingerprints will burn permanently onto the chrome.